Hi guys, welcome to the channel. My name's Chris Wright. I'm a landscape photographer based in Granada, Spain. Now, today I was planning to talk about my new acquisition. I bought a couple of weeks ago now the Canon 11 to 24mm L lens, and for those of you who've never seen or used this lens, there's an example of a shot I made with it behind me. And it is by a long distance the best ultra-wide lens I've ever used. Straight lines remain straight, everything is just perfect. But circumstances have conspired against me. We have going on at the moment the almond harvest, and you may hear the rattle of them shelling almonds adjacent to the house. And that has had a surprising knock-on effect. I left the doors open to the studio, and when I came back, everything, my cameras, lenses, computers, everything was covered in a fine layer of almond dust. It is the dustiest activity known to man. So, so there's been a bit of a major clean-up undertaken here. So what I thought I would do instead, while I gather the photographs to cover this lens adequately, what I thought I'd do instead is have a look at how jettisoning my photography bags changed my landscape photography for the better. And if that seems like a far-fetched conclusion, listen on. Now, when I moved to Spain full-time, which was about 3.5 years ago now, I was aware that giving up a moderately successful studio-based photography business, specializing in photographing products, would not be something that I would be able to repeat in Spain, a country where I barely spoke the language, and I'm not Spanish in any case. So that was always going to be a difficult trick to pull off. So I was aware that I was going to revert my photography practice back to landscape photography, which is where I came in. It was landscapes that originally attracted me to photography, so it seemed like a reasonable plan. Spain has fantastic mountains, deserts, loads of great things to photograph other than the beaches, which we're all familiar with. So the first thing I did was to jettison a lot of studio kit and a lot of lenses that were really only good for the studio-based photography that I was doing. So lights, lenses, and anything that was going to weigh me down, basically. And I swapped all this kit out for 3 new lenses, and I got the Canon 16-35 wide-angle lens, I got the 24-70 mid-range lens, and I got the Mark II 70 to 200mm long lens. And I figured that would set me up pretty much for everything that I wanted to do in landscapes, and of course I was wrong. Goes without saying, really, it's the story of my life. But this setup really stood me in good stead, and I then turned my attention to getting rid of 40 years worth of accumulated camera bags, and this covers every bag from the sort of little bag that you have with your first camera to much bigger, more capacious bags, and I just seem to have accumulated them frighteningly at a rate of more than 1 a year. So I had 40 bags taking up space in one of the rooms, and clearly this had become a bit of a talking point. So the whole lot of them went, and I swapped them out for 3 bags. Now, the point that I'm getting to here is obviously it wasn't just the getting rid of the photography bags that revolutionized my photography. What it was more to do with removing the choice, or rather removing the proliferation of choice. I'm the type of guy who in my career I've covered virtually every type of photography you can think of. 360-degree photography, macro photography, landscape photography, architectural photography. I've done architectural photography and product photography professionally for 5 years, and I consider that I'm probably a bit of a technical photographer, and this whole exercise has really made me focus down and get to grips with what I was actually photographing, and more pertinently, why I was photographing it. Now, the thing about product photography is what you're after is the perfect shot all of the time. You don't want anything that is not perfect, pristine, beautifully focused, sharp from front to back. Everything has got to be perfect, otherwise it is not going to work with clients. And so that had really driven me down a path of seeking perfection. And when I went out into the landscape, of course, to nobody's great surprise, certainly not to mine, I remained focused on that, getting that one shot that was going to encapsulate the entire landscape. And of course, I got some pretty cool shots. But reviewing them, what I realized was that I wasn't really telling any particular story. Perhaps if you took a year's worth of photographs and spread them out, there's clearly a story there. There's clearly a story of what I was up to, where I was going in the mountains and so on and so forth, and the desert. But I wasn't really telling any story about any particular shoot or any particular place, and I really wanted to address that in this video, and it is that point that I'm really trying to make. So the removal of choice in terms of the equipment that I carried, in terms of the lenses that were available to me and the things that I would then be capable of shooting well, was really key. Now, something else happened as well. Shortly after I got to Spain, I had a little bit of a brush with illness, and when I recovered, I thought to myself, I'm not doing these 15-mile hikes deep into the desert, deep into the mountains, carrying all of this kit. I weighed my bags and they were coming in at sort of 24, 25 kilos, and it's too much. I'm ancient, I'm 68 years old, and that was not what I wanted to be doing. So I thought the first thing I can think of is to get a smaller camera system, but I can't really afford to sacrifice all of this really expensive Canon kit just to get a smaller, lighter kit. And I don't want to change system any time soon because I really like Canon cameras. I know how to get the best out of them. I've been using them for 25 years practically daily. So that was never going to happen. So what I thought I would do instead was to cut down on the number of lenses that I take out, and instead of taking 3 to cover all possible focal lengths, I would take 2 or even sometimes 1 and restrict myself in that sense to taking a particular type of photograph. Now, along with all of this, I'm prone to having a very busy head, and I have taken a lot of different types of photographs, and I will seize on an idea and pursue it, and before you know it, I've changed my mind and I'm off doing the next thing. And I really wanted to really not get away from that, because I think it's a strength, me only. Everyone else thinks it's a terrible weakness, but there you have it. What I wanted to do was to really get to a position of calm and get to a position of organisation around the photography that I was doing. So I thought, in parallel with reducing the number of lenses and the amount of kit that I took out with me, I would break down my photography into types of photography and pursue them one at a time. It's not a revolutionary thought, but the notion of going out and doing macro photography, long distance photography, landscapes, urban photography, all in one trip, I would need to be 40 years younger to do that, and I'm not prepared to do that anymore. So what I wanted to do was not to throw away my wide-ranging interests. I love macro photography, I love landscape photography, I love architecture. The one thing I don't really enjoy photographing is people, which is why you never see really very much portrait photography from me. I don't find it enjoyable, and I have a few really good portraits in my portfolio, but they were hard come by. There are other people who are much better people photographers than me. So I didn't want to do that, but what I got to was the idea of treating the whole thing as a project. So let's say, you know, my Spanish adventure 2024, and I would go out and I would say, right, today we're going to get the context pictures. So I would take out my medium range lens and a wide angle lens and get pictures of the mountains at arm's distance. Drilling a little bit deeper into that, I can say that if I take my normal lens or a wide angle lens and get a sort of panoramic view of the mountains, that's never going to be a unique prize-winning shot. There are only so many ways you can photograph a range of mountains, and what makes it my story rather than the photographer next to me's story is in the choice of the more detailed shots that I do. So typically, you know, if I've gone out with a normal lens and a wide angle lens, typically I will turn the camera into portrait mode and use the wide angle to accentuate the foreground and, you know, bring the viewer into the picture. And it's the choice of those shots that is my particular message. That's my story. And so I can repeat that trick by going, today I'm not doing context, today I'm going to do macro photography, and let's have a look at some of the flora and fauna that live up in these mountains and the way that the rock formations are and so on. And that's a completely different story, and you need completely different equipment. You need a macro lens. You probably still take your normal lens, but you need the macro lens and you need lights to make those photographs look good. So that's a totally different rucksack. Architectural photography, I take a wide angle lens. I might want a tilt shift lens, which I don't currently possess, but no doubt it's on the shopping list for future. But you get my drift, I'm sure. What I'm doing is I'm breaking down the types of photography, and I'm saying basically today, forget the busy head, leave the busy head at home, go out and do this type of photography. And I have found this to be immensely beneficial. It forces me to concentrate much more. It forces me to really work the scene, and I've found it a big boost to my creativity. So I really recommend doing this. And I was going to call this, you know, a slow dive into minimalism or something pretentious like that, but it's not about minimalist photography. It's not about having a single thing in your photograph, but it's a healthy thing to do in landscape photography in particular is to sort of continue this holistic minimalist approach. We've pared down the equipment, we've pared down the options. Now let's make a composition and let's reduce that composition and remove all of the distracting features. And what you're left with, 9 times out of 10, is a good composition. And I would urge anybody to pursue this method of working. It really has worked well for me. It's not finished. I think this is something of a journey, and I'll probably be reporting back in another 6 months to report that I've completely changed my mind and I've got a new range of kit. But let's see how that goes. I think personally, I think that I'm quite excited about this, and I do think it's worth pursuing. So if you're still with us, thanks for sticking around and listening to this. I'm very grateful. If it's been useful to you, please pop down below, do the subscribe button if you're not already a subscriber, and please give us a like, because that does get the video out in front of more people. There's an actual cause and effect thing that goes on YouTube, so likes are really important. Please don't hold back. Okay, so next week we're back to the more conventional videos, and I think we're going to be looking at wide-angle architectural photography, and we're going to be looking at the new edition of Viewpoint, which I think is released today. So thanks very much, guys, and we'll see you next week.